Okay, what we're looking at today is F2 Management Accounting. In particular, what we want to consider is what management accounting is. What is it used for? And the distinction between management accounting and financial accounting. Now, if this is the case, the first thing we have to consider are the uses of management accounting. Secondly, we want to look at it in relation to financial accounting, and then we get into the bits and pieces. Firstly, what is information? In particular there, we want to consider the distinction between information and data. Secondly, the qualities of information. What qualities would we like in our information that allows us to use the information appropriately for management accounting? Thirdly, we want to make a distinction between strategic, tactical, and operational requirements. And finally, what we want to do is look at all the different types of centres. In essence, what we're doing here is we're trying to understand the language of management accounting. If we understand the language of management accounting, everything we do in F2 from here on in will make sense to you. So whatever we do in the next couple of sessions, you must focus on making sure that you have a full understanding of each and every term. In themselves, I don't think that they are difficult at all. But if you don't know what these terms mean, when we come to apply the terms later, again and again and again in F2, and if you wish, extending into your F5 studies, even into your F9 studies, and your P4 and P5 studies, you will always be in the dark. So, it all starts here. If we understand the language, we will quite easily be able to understand the relatively simple ideas that are present in F2. Now, the first thing we want to look at is why we need management accounting. So what is management accounting? Well, it is an accounting system that provides information for internal use by management. And if you think of what managers have to do to run the business, we could separate their tasks into three areas. The first area is that they must plan for the future. If they don't plan for the future, the company will fail. The company will fail because sooner or later, the company will be out of step with its environment. Secondly, we have to control. What we mean by control is we must compare our actual results to those that we originally thought we were going to achieve. If we don't have effective controls, again, the company may fail. Let's look at it from a personal perspective. If you don't plan what you intend to do over the next weeks and months in your studies, do you expect to be successful in the exam? The answer is probably not. If you don't control what you actually do in relation to your original study plan, do you expect to be successful? Again, the answer is probably not. So when we look at planning and control, these are regular events that companies must have information for on a weekly, monthly, and annual basis. We also have a third component. The third component that management need information for is to make decisions. If we were to look at the sort of decisions that a company may make, they may have to decide whether to invest in a business or not. You know, buy another company. And if that's the case, we have to look at the appropriate costs and revenues associated with that. They may have to decide whether to launch a new product or discontinue a product. And again, they'd have to look at the appropriate costs and revenues. So when we look at decision-making, the key difference between decision-making and planning and control is this. Planning and control is regular, monthly, annually, possibly even weekly. Whereas when we look at decision making, this is more of an ad hoc process. We make decisions as and when necessary. They are not necessarily regular. They could arise at any point in time. So if we get those ideas down, the uses of management accounting. 1, planning. It forces us to look to the future. 2, control. It allows us to compare our actual results to those that we originally expected and take corrective action. And 3, decision making. I will tell you that when you look at F5 or P5, you may be looking at more sophisticated ideas at the higher level papers. But in essence, this is all you're doing, and you heard it here first. So, we now know what it is that we're attempting to do. The next thing we have to do is say, well, if that's the case, what sort of information do we need in order that we can plan, control, and make decisions? And I suppose what you could say is that we need 3 separate types of information. But when we look at information, there are some basic qualities associated with the information that will always hold true. The first distinction that we have to make is this. What is the distinction between data and information? Well, if we're looking at data, I suppose what we're looking at here is the raw data. The information, very difficult to say this. Raw data. These are the facts and figures that we originally gather. The key feature associated with data is that it is unprocessed. A number in its own right doesn't make much sense. If I said to you that a company was making a profit of £100,000, would you say that was good or bad? Well, I suppose what we're saying here is it's a profit, it must be good. But if I then tell you that the company is worth many hundreds of billions, you would say, well, hold on a moment, that's not very big at all. So the issue of looking at information is that we take the basic raw data, and what we do is we make it useful. We put it into context. The way we put it into context is that we may compare the data to something else. We may calculate a ratio. But one way or another, we put it in a form that allows us to make decisions. So a very simple idea this. The distinction between data and information is that data is unprocessed. It is the raw material, if you wish, for the system that we're looking at. Information is what we need. Information is what we are going to use to plan, to control, to make decisions. And of course, our role is to move the data into a form that it is information. That is what we get paid for. If I were to ask you a question, let's say I said to you, what are the directions to the station? What qualities would I expect from you in the answer? If you said to me in response, blue, what am I going to do with that? Is it possible that the first quality is that your answer must be relevant to the question? So, if I asked you for directions to the station, I'm looking for you to come back and say, well, you walk 100 yards down the road and you turn left and things like that. Secondly, I would expect the information in timely fashion. I'm hoping you would give me the information immediately rather than walking off and coming back in half an hour's time. Thirdly, cost effective. I suppose what we mean by cost effective is simply this. If I asked for directions to the station and you said, well, that's going to cost you £200, I may decide that I will find the route myself, rather than relying on your very, very expensive directions. 4. Accurate. Okay, I've asked you for directions and you tell me that it's somewhere over there. You're probably correct, but how accurate is your answer? Somewhere over there could be in an arc of 90 degrees, and I could still get lost. So from this perspective, we're looking at information being sufficiently accurate that we can make decisions. Now hold on a moment. Given that we've looked at some of the core elements associated with good information, we now see that relevance, timeliness, cost-effectiveness and accuracy may work against each other. If we're looking at cost-effective, we do not want the information to cost too much. So we're looking here at balancing cost to benefit. So we may accept a slightly lower level of accuracy in order to ensure that the cost is not too high. Secondly, if we're looking at timeliness, we may say that roughly accurate information today is better than wholly accurate information in 2 or 3 or 4 days' time. So we have to weigh up one against the other. When we're looking at the qualities of good information, the sort of questions that you get in the exam here will simply say, which must we have? And when we look at the questions, normally the answer is pretty obvious. I've given you a selection of the qualities that you could expect. Of course, there are a number of other qualities that we could also introduce, things like reliability and consistency. And the key when we're looking at qualities of information is simply common sense. What is information used for? It is used to allow us to make decisions. If we can't make decisions from the sort of information that you're talking about, well, it's not good enough. Let's move on.